the smell of grass and leather. There were days when we'd play too. We'd cross the lines when the sun would shine and make our dreams come true. I had a glove on my hand and a girl in the stands. She stole my heart like a hit and run. It seems the world was so much simpler back then. We was just out there for fun. I pray for someone to hold your hand, and baseball in the summer, someone to walk with you when this world grows cold. Baseball in the summer, baseball in the summer.
VMAC Legendary Podcast Series, and we have today Jess Dixon, really one of the stalwarts and real pillars of the program, and a Hall of Famer, and I mean that as a person and as a player. So we are thrilled to have you, Jess. How are you doing? First off, why don't we start there just with a simple, give us a state of the union of all things Dixon.
Great. Thanks, Mike. Thanks for doing this. Thanks for inviting me to be a part of it. It's an exciting lead up to our game this fall. I'm looking forward to that. Things with me are very good. Recently got over a bit of a head cold, but otherwise doing well. There's countdown is on to the end of the semester, and looking forward. I've got a 12-month sabbatical starting on July 1st, so looking forward to a slightly different pace of life over the next year.
Well, I hear that you quite like getting out on a golf course, so I'm going to assume that somewhere in that 12-month sabbatical there might be the odd golf trip or two planned.
There may or may not be some golf involved in that 12 months, yes. That's a fair assumption to make.
That's great, and I think one other thing that we all have to kind of point out is that you still fit in your Brock baseball gear. Most of the rest of us don't, which is testament to the fact that you're probably still active and very healthy and are looking great. So those are all wonderful things. And we've been doing these. This is our 7th podcast we're putting down right now, and I generally start with. The love of the game. Where did your love of baseball start, and how long were you playing prior to coming to Brock? So I think that's always a great starting point, because there's, some things that are kind of showing themselves to be quite common amongst all the players. But why don't we start there, Jess? Where did you grow up? And, when did you start kind of into sports and baseball in particular?
Yeah, so for me, let's see here. So I grew up in Stony Creek, Ontario, just a suburb of Hamilton, and spent most of my youth there, with the exception of we lived in Ancaster for 2 years. That would have been my first 2 years of high school, grade 9 and 10, but then moved back to Stony Creek. So grew up in Stony Creek, lots of great friends there that I met along the way, and got introduced to baseball through my dad. My dad, I remember when I was very young, was playing fastball. He, in his family, there was a lot of kids and not a lot of money to go around, so they didn't all have the opportunity to play, competitive or league sports when they were a kid. If it wasn't a part of their high school curriculum, they really didn't get a chance. Soccer was the extent of what my dad got to play in terms of organized sport when he was a kid. And so it wasn't until he was an adult and moved out of his parents' house that he started playing other sports, hockey and baseball in particular, and then golf sort of came later for him as well as he was closer to 30. But I can remember being very young, going to the park and watching my dad play ball, and I thought, wow, this looks like a lot of fun. You're outside, enjoying the nice weather, and then I also remember he didn't play hockey for as long. But I do remember going to the ice rink a few times and watching him play hockey too. And so that was kind of my inspiration and my foray into hockey and baseball, and then eventually golf as well. My dad still plays golf quite a bit, and it was probably, of the three sports, that was the one that he was probably the best at. And I would say at this point in my career, that's the sport that I'm best at as well. So yeah, that's where I got introduced to it. And Mahoney Park is where I started playing baseball. So, which is in Hamilton. Most of the other kids in Stony Creek were playing Little League in Stony Creek, but my dad wanted me to play regular baseball as opposed to the Little League, and learn the rules of the game and so forth. So Mahoney Park was where it was at, and I think I started there when I was in about 6 years old. They had a baseball school that you did for 2 years before you actually got into the different age divisions and started working your way up. And it was great. I thoroughly enjoyed it. I played at Mahoney Park right through until the end of my midget was the name of the age category at the time, and then from there I played a season with the Hamilton Junior Cardinals, and then moved to Glanbrook. The Glanbrook Grizzlies was the junior team, and then I played I think that's one maybe part of a second season with the Glanbrook senior team.
That's a long time to be playing. So you'd clocked almost. I think my math is getting worse as I get older, but that's probably about 13 years you were playing before you got into the Brock side. So that's that's outstanding. And did you have any exposure to any of our teammates prior to Brock? Like I believe you may have crossed paths with Rick Bottomley a few times.
Yeah, so Rick Bottomley is one of my oldest friends. He and I, we actually met playing hockey together when we were 9 years old. And the same year that we were playing hockey together, he moved onto my street where we grew up. So we grew up on the same street, went to the same elementary school, same high school, eventually the same university. Rick and I still keep in real close contact. We went golfing in Myrtle Beach this past fall together. His wife, and my wife, we all get together around the holidays and trying to get together more regularly during the summer months as well. But Rick and I go way back more than just about any of my other friends, and certainly anybody that I continue to hang out with to this day. So yeah, we're still pretty tight. In terms of some of the other players, played against Matt Fletcher. As great a teammate as he was, you hated playing against that guy. And he was a thorn in the side of a lot of the other teams that we played against for all the reasons that made him a great teammate. So him, Ryan Thompson also played in Dundas, and so we played a lot against him. And then there were some other players that came in subsequent years that we knew from either playing in Stony Creek or in Glanbrook. There were a couple players for McMaster actually that played in Glanbrook too, so got to know some of those guys. And there was a few others. One was at Waterloo, another was at Laurier over the years. But yeah, lots of connections with different people in those early years.
Yeah, it's outstanding. And Rick, I think I was saying on Colin's podcast that Rick just always, and both of you just always had these great positive personalities that were easy as teammates. I think it's not everyone on a ball team is going to be easy to warm up to. Let's put it that way. You have 25 different personalities sometimes, and so I think being a good teammate is an undervalued talent in life. What did you hear about the baseball program prior to going to Brock, or were you already? Did you make it? Was it part of your decision to go there?
Now, so that's really interesting. So I had applied. So I did a victory lap of high school. I did an extra year of high school. I wasn't quite sure what I wanted to do. My birth date is in November, so I was a little bit later developing than some of my peers. And Rick and I decided we were going to do a victory lap of high school. His birthday was in December, so same thing. We weren't quite sure what we wanted to do, and ideally, I think we wanted to try and do it together. So but eventually, when the time came, I applied to Brock. I had applied and was accepted to McMaster as well. Would have been an interesting fortune if I decided to go there, I suppose. And I think I also got accepted to York, but really, that really wasn't somewhere that I wanted to go. But I didn't know anything about the baseball program. I had no idea that was happening. I was coaching baseball that summer of '95, and a guy who I was coaching with was a scout with the Blue Jays, and he told me, I guess at some point during that summer when Mike McRae came on board, he mentioned to me that, hey, did you know that there was a baseball program starting at Brock? And at that point, I had no idea. And so he reached out to Mike and said, hey, I know this kid that I'm coaching with. He'd love to try out if there's an open camp or something like that. I don't know exactly how the conversation went, but he got me in touch with Mike and shared with him that I was playing baseball with Rick, and he knew Ricky. He had coached Ricky with Team Ontario. Rick was an exceptional athlete all the way around, and an even better person. So he was a bit of a known commodity. And when I said, I was playing with Rick and that sort of stuff, he's like, yeah, if you're playing with him, you probably, at least in the talent range that we're looking for, come on out, here's the information. And shared it with Rick, and he's like, no way, this is awesome news. Let's make this happen. And so we showed up on the first day of camp, and the rest, as they say, is history. I think day 2, we started carpooling with Matt Fletcher and Ryan Thompson, and I think we did that the rest of the week because we hadn't quite moved into our places in St. Catharines at that time. Truth be told, Rick and I, for the first month, were commuting back and forth from Stony Creek every day. We're taking turns driving, and it just became too overwhelming. And my parents ended up helping me find a place to live in St. Catharines so that I wasn't spending as much time on the QVW or the 406, given the early morning classes, the late nights after home games or travel games or practices or whatever the case may be. So. I had no idea about Brock before that. Sort of serendipitous the way it all worked out.
Yeah, that's, I guess, probably about halfway through that duck walk, you're probably regretting it at a certain point. I don't know whether you had to do it or not, but do you remember what your first impressions were the first day of camp, where there was, it wasn't just 20 kids there. It was, I think there were close to 60 of us.
Yeah.
And your first impressions of, about 60 people there, and I think a lot deeper than anyone would have anticipated going there.
Yeah, no, it was quite the impressive sight. I mean, the quality of the talent was way better than I was anticipating. There were a few duds that probably realized very quickly they were, maybe a little outclassed by the others who were there. And I think in some cases they just didn't show up the next day. In other cases, got their name not added to the list at the end of each subsequent day of training camp. But there were a couple of things on the first day that really I remember as being, okay, this is different. The first I remember, we were sort of sitting down or taking a knee or something right around home plate on the third base side. And, Mike was just kind of, Coach McRae was kind of going through, some of the, I guess, the philosophical things that we were going to do differently, and there was the little things that were going to make a difference in winning games over the course of an extended season. And so I remember, it started off very early with how we run the bases. Could you, nail down the approach that we were going to take to base running, starting with out of the box. And so I remember Jeff Hoover kind of demonstrating, okay, we're going to, if it's ball 4, we're dropping our bat, we're not throwing it, we're sprinting down to first base, we're looking to the right side in case there's an overthrow or something like that. We're breaking down, we're turning back, and opening up to third base to catch a sign. I'm like, okay. I've never heard anybody explain to me why we're doing all those things, but it totally makes sense, right? And I thought that Mike and the other coaching staff did a really good job of not just saying why we're doing things or what we're going to do, but why we're doing it. And for me, all that stuff made sense. And so that was one thing. I'm like, okay, this is different. This is a different level of coaching than what I've experienced to this point in time. And then I remember another instance when we were doing some infield outfield drills. And I remember the first ball hit to Tinish in right field and watching him throw to third. And everybody just stopped what they were doing, it seemed. Didn't matter whether they were at the hitting tunnel down the right field line there, or if they were on the infield, trying to set up for cutoffs or whatever the case may be. But everybody just stopped when he unleashed his first throw to third base. And I'm like, did we just see that? I'd never seen an arm like that, And so another ball hit out to him, and again another hose to third base, and it was like, wow, I haven't seen that before. And so there are some really great memories of that first day, let alone the rest of camp. But yeah, my first impressions were like, okay, we're not in Kansas anymore. This is, if you want to make this team, you're going to have to step up your game a little bit.
Yeah, and you're and we've talked to a couple of first basemen. It was a difficult situation because there was 6 of you.
Yep.
I mean, I played on a really deep, provincially ranked Oshawa team, and we only ever had 2 first basemen, right? You would have one left-handed, one right-handed stick, and both could rake. And that was as deep as it got, but we had 6 really starting caliber first basemen all fighting it out for, I think probably in everyone's mind, it was 2 spots, but we ended up keeping 4. But what was that like? That must have been pretty intense.
That was super intense because I think I was the smallest of all 6 of them. There were a couple of guys who were easily 6'4" that didn't make the team, that had way more range. But I remember, a couple of things. I mean, I had some versatility. I'd played a number of other positions as well. And over the course of my 4 years with the team, I played first, second, third, catcher, and left field. So I got to play a lot of different positions. And so I think that helped me a little bit, the fact that I did have some versatility and can maybe fill in a few other spots if there was a need. The other thing is my determination. I was gonna do everything I could to earn that position. And I remember on the last day of camp, hitting 2 triples, and even then that wasn't enough, because I remember at the very end, I think the rest of camp was over, and the 6 of us were sitting at first base, and McRae just rifled ground balls and one-hoppers at us just to see who wanted it the most. And I was definitely getting dirty and diving all over the place, trying to earn that spot. And it was super intense. And I honestly didn't think it was going to be enough. But turns out that it was, and it was one of the best things that ever happened to me.
Yeah, I know the 2 that got cut because they had come from the spring practices, and they'd have been very handy in a bar fight or a brawl. They were just the one guy was 6'8".
Oh yeah, they're huge.
Just monsters. But things work out the way that they work out because of things that the coaches observed. The players, I remember it being so busy and everything being so chock full of activity every day that you didn't really get a chance to kind of notice things like people's attitude or their determination. Like, it was hard because we were just always so busy. Yeah. And, as a pitcher, we would generally get isolated with the catchers because we were doing so many more drills than is typical of when you play summer ball. You kind of do a bullpen session, as Garten liked to say. We would throw a bullpen session. You do a couple foul pulls, and then you were shagging flies and just kind of, not doing much. And so pitchers would get to observe a lot more. We didn't see much of anything because we were 100% in our own drill and we had just a totally different world. We were doing towel drills and all kinds of stuff.
Yep.
Do you remember your early interactions with the coaches? And I'll start with the one that, we'll obviously start with Coach McRae. He's the head coach of the team. He sets the tone. Do you remember what your initial feelings were of dealing with Coach McRae?
Yeah, I mean, he was intimidating. He was scary, but super knowledgeable at the same time. And I wanted to learn from him. And so when he spoke, I listened, and yeah, I had the utmost respect for him. There were things. It's funny, I've spoken to him years afterwards about why he did certain things during that first year that I didn't really understand at the time, and he didn't fully disclose why he was doing them. But I've had a chance to speak with him since, and I'm like, okay, that kind of makes sense, as someone who likes to understand the why behind things. Part of the reason I continued on with my education, but there were things that he did sometimes that I'm like, I don't get it, I don't understand it, and I wanted to understand it. But those were things that he didn't necessarily share with the players at that time. That afterwards I've spoken to him and have a better understanding. But yeah, I mean, the utmost respect for the guy. I learned more in that 1 year from him than I probably did from any other coach over the course of my entire baseball playing career. I knew not to cross him, and I knew that if I wanted to play, I was going to have to earn that spot. And I worked as hard as I could every day to try and make that happen. Yeah, so those are my thoughts on Mike.
Yeah, he would make for a really good poker player sometimes, right? It's hard to get a read off of him. And other than, kind of stoicism, which is kind of a philosophy I learned a little bit about as an adult, but at the time, everyone is used to their coaches that they would have had in rep ball or in high school or whatever, where different style completely from that perspective. Do you remember your first interaction with Coach Briggs Jude and what Wayne was like?
Yeah, I don't remember my first interactions with him per se, but I do remember interactions with him. I don't think he did a whole lot with the infielders in those early days. I think he was mostly working with the outfielders, so I didn't get as much opportunity to interact with him, except on the bus rides. He was always driving one of the buses and, getting kicked in the head when we were wrestling in the back, or, he took a lick at that first year. They'd have bodies flying over the different rows of seating as we were, horsing around as we did, and then probably breaking all kinds of laws in the Highway Traffic Act and so forth. But he, but he was the kind of guy that if you had a concern, you could go to and trust, knowing that he'd hear you out. I felt like if there was something serious, he would take it up with the other coaches or whatever the case may be. But he was, if there was such a thing as a sort of a player's coach, I think he was it. Like, he's a guy that you could trust, and you always kind of knew where you stood with him. So I really admired him. I really respected him. And, still love catching up with him occasionally when we do at barbecues and whatnot.
Yeah, he reminds me of a line in a movie. He's the one constant, never-changing world is Wayne Briggs Jude. The voice is always the same. The enthusiasm is always the same. The mustache is always the same.
Yeah, for sure.
I've always thought of Wayne Briggs Jude as kind of like everybody's uncle. You kind of just felt like that,
Yeah.
Daryl Kemp would be it would be interesting for me to hear from you what you thought of Daryl Kemp, because I had the privilege of playing on a summer team with Kemp as a player the summer before Brock. And it's one thing to see that guy on a baseball field. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
but
for sure.
It also gave me some more exposure to understanding how Daryl communicated. So Daryl Kemp was, I had the benefit of playing with him for a summer. So from that, I think the biggest reward of that, other than seeing him crush pitches every so once in a while, was I got to learn his communication style. And Daryl would say something hilariously funny, like spit out a one-liner. But everything else was very economical. It was very short and to the point and helpful. And I think people could misinterpret that as being intimidated by him, because he was truly, that was a guy that looked like a ball player, acted like a ball player, and had the career to back it up. Tell me a little bit about what it was like dealing with Daryl Kemp.
Yeah, I really like Daryl. I came in as a smaller guy. I was a front foot hitter. I think there was some concern of how I might be able to handle off-speed pitches and that kind of stuff. And so he worked with me a lot in trying to overcome that and change my swing quite a bit in that first year. And so I worked with him a lot, and I really appreciated all of his insights. Like, he was very, very knowledgeable, very insightful, and he would demonstrate. Like, if every once in a while, I don't know if he necessarily did it in the first year. I can't recall, but I know in subsequent years he took some batting practice with us, and he could still pound a baseball, right? So I mean, if at any point in time you wanted to question whether or not his tactics work, like just watch him go and rip the leather off a few balls, and okay, he's speaking from experience, and only wants to see us be the absolute best that we can be. But you're right, he's a very direct communicator. Some of his sarcasm is just hysterical. Some of his one-liners over the course of the years that I played with him, he was awesome. And I had a great opportunity to catch up with him this past summer. I hadn't seen him in a number of years, and I guess it wasn't in the summer. It was in the fall. Brock was playing against I think it was Guelph or something in the OUA championships, or one of the semifinals or quarterfinals or something. And his son was there. He's playing on the team this year, and so he was there, and his daughter was there, and I got to meet her and chat with him about what he's been up to, and really have a ton of respect for that guy. Really like him.
Yeah, that's it's interesting. So I wouldn't think that you would have had a great deal of dealings with Coach Topping since you weren't a pitcher, so I won't go down that road. I wouldn't assume you would have had tons of interaction unless you had something that stands out.
No, but I remember him always having different drills for you guys to do. That if I was taking a look down the outfield line or something, or on foul territory, you guys would be doing some other drills, and like, God, I've never seen that drill before. But you just seem to have like a creative knack to try to instill different kinds of whether it was drills for your mechanics or balance, or again, it's just that the level of coaching was nothing I had seen in my previous experience playing baseball.
Yeah, what I would say is Tim's greatest strength was personality management. The hard part about pitchers is, when they're not on the mound, they're generally either in their own head or they're good teammates. Like there's really not much of a variance there, and but as performers, because it's a little bit squarely on the shoulders, at least when you get the ball to start a game or start an inning, and if you screw up, you're going to sink your team. It can be high maintenance. So there are some unique personalities in the pitching room. And, I think it takes a maestro to be able to kind of navigate that. But you did have lots of exposure with, the last two coaches that I think are going to be really interesting to hear your perspective on. And we'll start with Mark LePage, who at that point was a student coach.
Yep.
Who had been with the program right from the beginning, but quickly, I think, transitioned into wanting to help in any way he could. You remember about early Mark LePage, because we've had exposure to him now that he's the coach. But what do you remember about Coach LePage, other than he was like a sponge? He was absorbing everything that was coming out of the Mike and Daryl learning tree at that point. But tell me about your early interactions with Mark LePage.
Yeah, again, my experience with him was very positive. A lot like a lot like Briggs Jude in the fact that you could talk with him, but not quite as experienced, and not quite your uncle, but maybe your cousin, or just 'cause there's a bit of an age difference between the two. But I always got along really well with Mark. He was like a sponge. Like he would wait on bated breath for anything that Daryl would say or Mike would say, and I think over the years really started to see him absorbing that information and kind of cultivating his own approach to coaching and to baseball. Something that I don't know that necessarily was fully developed in those early years. I think he was still trying to figure out his role within the team, and and he wasn't. He was probably your age, maybe even younger than you at the time. I can't recall, but it'd be pretty close. So I think it was a difficult just managing his role within the team, recognizing he was the age of some of the players, and maybe didn't get the same respect that some of the other coaches did. And it would have been, I imagine it would have been pretty tough on him, because you don't want to find yourself in a situation where you're befriending the athletes and isolating yourself from the coaches, but also you also want to be a sounding board for those players to convey information up and down to the rest of the coaching staff. So it would have been probably pretty difficult for him in those early years, but to his credit, he stuck with it. Probably the most the most committed of anyone to that program for all those years. I have a lot of respect for him.
Yeah, we'll talk later about how difficult it is to maintain a division of, well, I'll just use the cliche, but church and state. When you're administrating the team and you've got a relationship with the coaches that's a little bit outside the playing field, just how hard it is. And it was really hard with Mark because, when we first came across Mark, he was a guy that was helping sign people up in the hall and, was helping hang banners and all those kinds of things that were really rudimentary beginnings. And, we would still have liked to have had conversations with him that were more friend-based, but Ted and I didn't have that luxury, given the dynamics of Coach McRae, as opposed to, maybe coaches that followed Coach McRae. There was a hard line. If we had a conversation that, was about money or schedule or, players or anything like that, it occurred so far away from the team that, it was kind of like held in a, it's like a mob meeting. It was held somewhere so far off campus that no one knew that we were having those conversations. And we'll get into that a little bit later when you kind of transition into that role, which is a thankless one. Truthfully, people don't know you're up to what you're doing. They have no idea. And it can be difficult bouncing between the administration of the university and the administration of the baseball team, which brings us to a very interesting addition from my point of view, Jeff Lounsbury to the team as a coach, and he would have worked heavily with you as an infield coach. And time has changed my perspective on Jeff Lounsbury immensely. So I'll tell you what it was at the time. Jeff came to play because we were short players in the summer, and he hopped on the bus, and it was the Jeff Lounsbury of 1995. So he was rocking a mullet. He had an earring in, and he had the aviator sunglasses on, and he had white cleats. And for me, who was like a super fascist when it comes to baseball, you don't even wear stirrups around me or you're going to get it. You don't wear eye black at night games, all that stuff that's kind of old school. I looked at Jeff and went, oh my God, I'm having a hard time buying his credibility as a coach, because he doesn't look the part compared to the kinds of coaches I've been used to, or at least the ones at the very high end. And, the way Coach McRae carried himself, the way that Coach Kemp, Jeff was a complete opposite of all of that. And so when he came to camp and was a very enthusiastic sergeant in Mike's army, let's put it that way, Jeff really had to work to get, me on side from a respect perspective. And he did, and in subsequent years, he's really earned it by his greatest talent is his hard work. But what were your initial thoughts on Lounsbury? Were they similar in vein to mine, or were they just maybe a little less harsh?
Yeah, I mean, Jeff and I got along really well for a number of years. We still do. We're still in touch fairly regularly, not as often as we probably should be or like to be. But yeah, I had a lot of respect for Jeff, but it took some time to get there. And it was nothing necessarily that he did or didn't do. It just seemed that, it was clear in those early days that Mike was the one calling the shots, and Jeff was sort of the one that was, putting things into action, whether those were practice plans or, calling the signs at third base or whatever the case may be. There was a very clear pecking order in terms of, who's doing what on that coaching staff. And Jeff did work a lot with the infielders. And, I think to his credit, he was still, learning and making mistakes and, trying to figure out his role within the coaching staff. I think there were times over the course of not just that first year, but another years where balancing, the responsibility of being a coach versus, wanting to be friendly with the athletes, I think sometimes was maybe difficult. And so that was something that was very different than McRae. Like with McRae, it was very clear, I'm the coach, you're the athlete, you're going to do what I tell you. And I found with Jeff, there was a little bit more gray area there at times, which I actually didn't mind because it sort of helped, kind of like with Briggs Jude, it gave me someone else that I could speak to and kind of bounce ideas off of and try to understand a little bit more. But yeah, my impression of him changed a lot when he took over as head coach, obviously, and continued following in the path that Mike had developed and put the entire program on. And it would have been really easy, I think, for Jeff or anyone else to say, okay, we're not going to do that anymore. We're going to do it this way because it's easier. Jeff didn't do that. Jeff continued to try to push the envelope and try to make the program as good as it could be in the original vision that I think, you and Ted and perhaps Mike and Wayne and Jeff would have had, probably some say in that as well, but kind of carrying out that original vision and mission that we had for the program in those early years.
It's interesting to hear your feedback. It's interesting. So you're in a uber competitive situation at first. You're there, Rick Bottomley, and then obviously you would have started to grow a little bit of a relationship with Ryan Thompson and Matt that you had previously played against, and you guys are commuting in at least for a little while. Do you remember any other relationships that kind of blossomed a little bit? I mean, everyone knows about Todd and Ron. No. But do you remember any other players that, you started to develop real friendships with in those early days?
So in that first year, me, Rick, Chris Grucci, Colin Tyler, and Andrew Tinish were all pretty tight. Matt Fletcher to a degree as well. But we were all in, me, Rick, Chris Grucci, Andrew Tinish, we were all in the same program. So we basically were in the same classes, during the winter months when we were in indoor training, we'd go right from our morning workouts to class and sleep in the back row of Thistle 325 or whatever the classroom was. We all always sat in the same areas. I probably still have some notebooks somewhere of, Andrew Tinish leaving me some not so friendly messages in my notebooks while I dozed off, and vice versa. But yeah, we hung out a lot outside of school. We or outside of baseball. We'd get together in the evenings. We'd watch movies. We'd go to the bars. We'd just hang out, study together. So there's a core group of us that we're all pretty tight. Oddly, two of the other first basemen were part of that. Maybe that's because we all shared the same fate during that first week of training camp. And Chris had his own sort of posse with the other Oshawa friends there, with the Houston brothers and so forth, and yourself. But so we were all pretty tight that group, and continue to be roommates in subsequent years. That's lots of close friendships there.
Yeah, I think, I've had some time to think about it as we've done more of these. And there was initially at camp for sure that there was a core of Oshawa guys. There was a core of Burlington guys in particular. Yep. They were all, they hung together really thick as thieves. But, over the course of the season, some other relationships developed because of the position grouping. So, out of the pitching staff, the older guys who were staring down graduation. So myself, Ted, Rob Green, Todd, we were an Ebel, we're all very tight in that regard. And we're trying to kind of provide a little bit of mentoring to people like Joel and Steve Vatour, who were younger than us for sure. Yep. And we were the only position group on the team that had that age about it. There were no other fourth years. There were no other third years on any other position. It was all freshmen.
Yeah.
So, that part made it a little bit difficult for us to develop longstanding friendships and relationships with the position guys, other than the ones we would have known before. Because I think, a year in university, especially when you've been taking classes, or 2 years, is a lifetime when you have kids that are coming in and adjusting to a life that is now just class and baseball, but they've never had the experience of having been there already for a year, or in my case, 2, maybe even 3. Jesus, my memory is bad now. But, I had already, we had already lived a lifetime at Brock. So, it's a totally different thing. What do you recall about the season? There's a lot of kind of infamous stories that come out of the season, but each person seems to have different odd personalized memories. What do you remember about the season, and, how you navigated your position on the team throughout the season? And do you recall any kind of tent poles or memories that really come back to you?
Yeah, there was a lot of very, very positive memories. I probably wouldn't have stuck around for a second and subsequent years if they weren't positive. There were a number of things that sort of stick out. I remember freezing cold games at McMaster. I remember McRae's wife, may she rest in peace, bringing him Taco Bell during the game, and the steam coming off of his burritos or whatever tacos he was eating in the bench as we were there freezing to death, running rinse sprints between innings, trying to keep warm in case we get called out for a pinch run situation, which I eventually did. And Colin Tyler and others like to remind me of how I dropped the helmet that he passed to me as he was running off the field, and I proceeded to kick it a couple of times before I actually got it on my head. But yeah, that was a very, very cold game, and I remember that one quite well. I remember going to Cooperstown and playing against Malloy. I played both ends of the doubleheader there. That was probably a highlight for me that weekend, because I traveled all the way down there. I got the start in game one at first base. I played well defensively, but also had a good day at the plate. And again, carrying four first basemen, it was quite common, depending on righty lefty matchups, who was going to get the call for the second game. But I got to start the second game, and I think I played all 14 innings. Those were 7-inning games that day. But I think I played all 14 innings at first base, and the drive down, the drive back, going to the Hall of Fame, Nish getting shot at from the tree, the police showing up, saying some not so nice things in the dugout. That was pretty wild. I remember going to St. Bonaventure and McRae getting kicked out after Vautour hit that guy square in the chest when he squared to bunt. Had it coming to him, but keep your spikes down going into second base. You don't have that problem.
Yep.
But I remember that. I remember playing against at the Durham College tournament. We did that for a number of years, and we had some early success there, which was great. And this is where the discussion with McRae years later. You may recall, Mike, we were doing like 6:30 a.m. running practices in the weeks leading up to that tournament. And this is McRae's side of the story. You may need to verify it from him, but I remember we were doing, we didn't even bring our gear. It was just bring your running shoes. We're running at 6:30 a.m. We were running from foul pole to foul pole, and thank God Colin was on our team to kind of give us a chance to catch our breath while he was kind of finishing the last of the foul poles. But I spoke to McRae. I'm like, man, why did you torture us for that? Like, what did we do wrong that warranted us to have to do all that running? And he's like, well, I mean, the endurance, part of it is important. It's a long season. I need to make sure you guys were in shape. He said, but the other thing is we had an 8:30 or 9 a.m. game at the Durham College tournament. We were driving up that morning, and he wanted to make sure that we could get up and be ready to play.
Yeah, Mike is a little bit like a chess player. But the thing I remember mostly about that is because we had run an ungodly amount over the course of an entire summer to get in shape for this. But poor Chris Peters ended up throwing up after those morning sessions. And
yeah.
Chris today I think probably has like 0% body fat. He was a firefighter.
Last time I saw him, he was in pretty good shape.
Yeah. And but I just remember thinking, God, this is what are we going to learn from this? Probably not much, other than just the pure discipline of being the world's most in shape baseball, varsity baseball team. And I hated getting up for 6:30. Any of us did. And
yep.
I had a slew of 9:30 classes. So, not a lot of time in between finishing up and then, grabbing a quick shower and getting off to school. But, very interesting from that perspective. And so we get, there's a couple of
there was also sorry, Mike, I didn't mean to cut you out. There was also the Montreal trip, right, which was also cold and snowy, and I remember the wiffle ball games and Green's talk in the dressing room, the players only meeting before the tournament kind of got started, and he was giving us the pep talk and all that sort of stuff. Lots of good memories from that trip as well. Tons of great memories from that first year.
Yeah, I think the trip to Montreal was interesting. I have a couple of things I've not unfurled from that I'll save for a later podcast that are going to get people's attention. But Rob, I knew what Rob was. Okay, that guy pitched all year with a wonky arm. He was hurt, and lots of us had really good years because we were physically sound and we learn a lot. And, it's easy to go have a year where you can be a contributing member of a team when you're healthy. But that guy got hit I remember him getting hit in the game against Dalhousie by a line drive that nearly carried him into right field, and knocked him down, and he somehow got up and threw the guy out at first and then collapsed again because the rest of us would have needed to be ambulanced off the field. And I remember turning to, I don't remember who was beside me, but I'm like, that is such a Rob Green play. I still have that kind of blood and guts, arm hanging there by a thread kind of impression of Rob. And what a great leader from that perspective. And you kind of take your leadership moments and absorb them a little bit. It's just very interesting from that perspective. And, ultimately we get through the first year. Lots of really good friendships because it's kind of like being at war together. Yeah. And I remember the turning point for me with you is an interesting one. You're not going to know this, but somehow I kind of ended up, one of my passions outside of baseball is music. And around that time I had gone to see, in the summer of 94, before my brother ended up in the hospital, I'd gone to see a Pink Floyd concert live, and it was amazing. But they released this live album called Pulse that had a little flashing thing on the CD cover.
Still have it.
And you were a guy that had it. And I went like, God damn it, Jess is super cool. I got to get to know this guy because, I thought I was, Ted would just look at me like my head was off. He listened to really shitty music. Let's be truthful about it. He was like into Crowded House and stuff like that, which is now cool. But at the time I was like, come on, you got to be, I was really into grunge rock, but Floyd was so amazing having seen them. So I remember you either had it in your car or maybe I came across your res room or something, but I thought, that Jess Dixon, that's good stuff right there.
That's a pretty random memory. I still have that CD. The light no longer pulses. The battery eventually died. But I also went to that concert. Well, I don't know if it was the same concert. I think it was in 93 or 94. It was at Exhibition Stadium. And I had like a big, probably 4-foot by 6-foot poster of the Division Bell kind of logo and everything that I had in my, I don't think I ever brought it to Brock, but I had it in my bedroom at home where I was living at the time. Great concert, great band.
Yeah. So that's, completely random. But I think part of, the uniqueness of your story is, you had some exposure to some of the stuff we had to do to keep the program afloat. So I'm noticing that everyone's dad is really a big driver in their stories with Brock. Their fathers they either started their love of baseball by listening to Tom and Jerry and the Jays on the radio, or they emulated, like you did, your dad's sports, but your choices. But your dad was really a super parent, in terms of our fans. And, really helped out because, and I'm not going to go into an extended autopsy on the program's finances, but the ambition of the program, let's just say it exceeded the ability for us to generate the funding to cover it. So we had to do all kinds of interesting things to try to survive. One was selling T-shirts, which I still have, at $20 a shot to all of our friends and family and roommates and stuff. Yep. Why don't you talk about what your dad did and, us having to, going out and selling raffle tickets for a car? Yeah.
So, you're right. I mean, that first year we took on a lot of costs and, there wasn't a whole lot of revenue coming in to offset those. And it was a club sport at the time. And, so there was some fundraising to do. And, I had come to the university after in high school, started a high school baseball team. So we did not have, within the Hamilton board, there were teams that not so different than at the university, though. There were some schools that had programs, and but a lot of them didn't. And I thought, well, why don't we have one here at our high school? We've got a lot of really great baseball players that I knew of different ages. I was working at a sporting goods store. I knew I could get, discounts on equipment and all that sort of stuff. And we had some parents who were coaches. And so, we just did it in high school. We got the uniforms, we got some sponsors, we worked with the city to get access to the park early. And we just willed it to make it happen. No different than you and Ted would have in getting it off the ground at Brock. And so, when me and Ted had those conversations, to me, it was just sort of a natural extension of what I had already done. And, my dad worked in sales, and he was, very good at what he did. I said he did all kinds of, he was on the board of directors for Crime Stoppers in Hamilton, and they did a lot of different fundraising initiatives. He had hosted all kinds of golf tournaments that raised money for Children's Wish Foundation and all sorts of other things. So he had some practical experience on raising money for different initiatives. And so we need to come up with if there's going to be a season 2, we need to come up with some solutions to do this. And we sold some shirts. I don't know if we had did we do a banquet in first year? I don't know if we did. I don't know if that came until subsequent years, but we did a banquet where we sold tickets, and the parents would come, the girlfriends and partners would come, and other friends of the program would come, and so forth. And so that was somewhat lucrative, but we needed something big. So we raffled off a vet, 1985 vet. And that's the way that we pitched it. I remember we had the table set up in the Thistle corridor, and we had the Bristol board. This is, before the days of computer generated graphics. We sold it as a vet. Didn't matter that it was a Chevette and not a Corvette. But it was a vet nevertheless. And my dad, I guess somebody must have traded in, and so he got it dirt cheap. And he may have been able to get his boss who owned the dealership to donate it. I'm not sure. So it was a tax expense for them. And then got another friend to put a paint job on it, and got another friend to safety it and all that kind of stuff to make sure it was road ready. And we raffled off tickets for a vet, and we did pretty well. I don't remember what the final number was, but there's somewhere between $5,000 and $10,000 I think we made on that raffle. I remember also we had it parked outside of the Thistle corridor for a week. I drove it back and forth to campus to show it off, and we parked it between the Thistle corridor and what's now the Walker complex. Now it's all connected, but I remember Bob Davis at the time saying, there's tunnels underneath there. Like if you park a car there for too long, it's going to fall through. Like, it's a Chevette. Because people can lift these things and move them without too much difficulty. I don't think the ground's going to be fine. But yeah, we did pretty good with that fundraiser. We did, in subsequent years, we did 50-50 draws at all of our home games. Got a lottery license through the university to do those. We did a concert. It wasn't Pink Floyd, but it was the Killjoys. So we had, and again, it was one of my dad's customers was the drummer for the Killjoys or something. And so arranged to have them and, do a concert, and we had it at Isaac's, and we sold tickets, and it was a bit of a flop, but you win some, you lose some, and you learn along the way.
Yeah. Nobody bats 1,000, Jess. That's just the way it is. So I'm going to ask you something that I think, probably Ted and I are the only ones that can relate to this. It is a unique proposition to be the administrative person that has to deal with the athletic director and with the coaches on a non-playing time level. You're dealing with things that are like policies regarding academic probation and that kind of stuff. Tell me about what your dealings were with like Bob Davis, because Ted and I kind of had fun in our podcast because Bob, rightfully so, was like standoffish a little bit with us. He would say to us, "You guys are better organized than anyone we've ever seen," but it was kind of, we really had to earn things with him. It was not granted. Richard DeChatelet, who was the assistant AD at the time, was a huge fan and was a big supporter. He would do anything. Mike Polino would do anything. He was there at the time. But Bob was a hard win for us, and probably justifiably so, given that we were a first-year program. You took that relationship to the next level, but Bob was an idiosyncratic guy. He was hard to read sometimes, and similar to Mike McRae in that, they'd be way better poker players than I would be because people could see what's on my face. Tell me a bit about what it was like when, what it was like dealing with Bob Davis for all those years.
Bob was awesome. The ironic part about the challenges that you and Ted had with him initially, it was wild because at heart he was a baseball fan. Like he wanted the program to be successful, and over the years he really warmed up to us. He was at a lot of our games, even post retirement. My understanding is he continued to come out to games and support the team. He was instrumental in moving the baseball team from a club sport to a varsity team. It would never have happened without his support. And there was, it took several years to kind of build up that trust. And it started with paying off some of those bills in the early years, right? There was a lot of debt, and it's things that if you were, budgeting over the course of, 5 or 10 years or something like that, stuff like uniforms, they're going to have, 3, 4, 5 year lifespan before you need to kind of turn those over and replenish them. But in the first year of a program, you have to buy all that stuff new, right? All the catcher's gear, all the bats, the balls, the uniforms, all of it. It's a huge upfront cost with no real revenue coming in, and that's not anyone's fault. I mean, I think that was the plan all along. It's just once the season hits, let's play ball, right? That was the focus, and so we ended up having to have some sit down conversations with him and kind of map out a plan. And I don't remember what the number was after the first year. I want to say it was north of $10,000 that we had outstanding to the city and to I can't remember, it was Stanford Source for Sports or something in Niagara Falls, and there was another supplier. But anyway, we had to, Bob agreed to pay off those debts, but I had to work with him to map out a plan for how I was going to pay it back. And we did. And so I think I developed a little bit of trust with him, and I think he respected that, if I said we were going to do something, we were going to do it. So whether that was putting name patches on the back of the jerseys, and everybody was responsible, for those next couple of years, you either found a sponsor to put on the back of your jersey, or you were ponying up the $250, to wear that jersey. That's just the way it was. And we made it work. We found ways to make it work. We did pasta nights at restaurants. We did all kinds of creative things. Started trying to get other sponsors to have signage at the games. Jeff had a connection with the duty free, and we were giving away cologne to the players of the game, and so it started to sort of evolve from there. But I think once we sort of developed a little bit of goodwill with Bob, he was a little more supportive and willing to extend himself a little bit more the next time when we came to him with another ask. And knowing that there was a plan in place, and that anything that we said that we would pay back, we did.
Yeah, it's impossible to quantify because it was a true startup.
Yep.
And you're right, when you start up a program, there was no, you know, there was not really a formal plan. And we had some budgets and a few other things. But, part of the difficulty with all of this was, we get to the end of the year, half the team is either graduating or leaving. And Teddy and I get an opportunity to run the sport in Toronto, but it's immediate. You got to jump in right away. And again, walking into a situation that we had no point of view on other than we knew the McMaster coaches, we knew the U of T coaches, we knew Ken at Durham in particular. But, now we're in Toronto and we got a few things accomplished. We got the first Sky Dome game and, put on a doubleheader there and, put U of T in thinking that U of T would draw all these fans to the Sky Dome because it was close. And I won't mention his name, but there was a sportscaster who said maybe the most politically incorrect thing because we had to do all the media too. So I did interviews with the Toronto Sun and the Toronto Star, and we're on television. And this kind of famous reporter says to me, Mike, the only way U of T is going to draw a crowd is if they put ping pong tables in the outfield. Can you believe that?
Ouch.
Yeah. Horrific, right?
Yeah.
And, but we also then ended up hosting the national championships in St. Catharines. And, you guys somehow managed to replace a roster that had been completely gutted. If you think about it, when Lounsbury and I were talking about it, out of the 10 pitchers that were on staff, only one came back. One. And, you're replacing out of there, out of 32 wins, I think Chris had 4 or 5. So you have 27 wins that are gone in all those innings. And you guys managed to make it back to the, to the final to play Dalhousie, who had that ridiculous Trevor Wambach pitcher who was, was next level. I don't know what it was about Brock and running into these next level pitchers that all were pros or ex-pros or whatever. It was a kind of a recurring theme there for a few years. Yeah. And you continue to shepherd the program, get great people in, and then eventually you win a national championship. What was that experience like? And because this also threads through to McMaster, you would have had way more games against, my best friend Brad Reeson and his inimitable way of everyone thinking that he didn't look like much until he would. Tell me a little bit about your memories of the rivalries with Mac and winning a national championship, Jess.
Yeah, so it was a really long journey. We got so close in that first year in Montreal. You figure that's, you're just on the precipice of getting there again. And you're right, that first roster was gutted. I think there was only six players in total that returned to the second year. It ended up being a great core of young players that continued for the pretty much the remainder of the 4 years that I was there, and some even stayed for the fifth year beyond. But we made it to the national championships in the second year, and again came so close, losing the championship final again. And then in third year, losing to McMaster, who then goes and wins nationals that year. Yeah. And so, each year we lost to the eventual national champions, either in that game or, in a previous game that then McMaster went on and represented Ontario and won. And so, each year we were just right there, but just couldn't get it done. The stars weren't aligned for us until that last year, my last year anyway. I decided I did an extra year of high school. I was not going to do an extra year of university. At least at the undergraduate level. Little did I know at that point that I was going to do another 8 years of university. But that's another conversation. But yeah, when we got there, we're qualified to go to Halifax, and McMaster was a big barrier to us getting there. It was like, okay, this is the time. We need to make it work. And so we had a great team. We had great pitching. We had some unbelievable hitters, fielders, but we put it all on the line. By that point, my role had changed quite a bit. I came to realize pretty quick I was never going to be a starter on the team, and so I accepted that role. Not everybody accepts the role of being a bench player. Um, and I think that could cause a lot of tension. But I tried to work with some of the younger players who I thought, could still make a really significant difference to the program and to that team specifically, if they just understood their role and accepted it. And sometimes coaches are not very clear in explaining that part of the process. And so I really tried to, mentor some of the younger athletes and say, look, you can still have a great 4 years, and meet some of your best friends and potentially win a national championship, and not necessarily have to be on the field to make that difference. And so that came with some of the administrative things that I was doing behind the scenes, but it was also catching in the bullpen and taking a beating from the pitchers down there as they're getting warmed up to go for games, and being there to throw the ball out to whoever is playing first base so they're ready to roll the next inning. Like, there's just the little things that you can do to make sure that your team is performing at the highest level and pushing them. But yeah, so I was determined that in whatever capacity I had, I was going to do everything that I could to make sure that our team was ready to be successful in Halifax. So little things like just team building things. We all dyed our hair that year, something we didn't do in previous years, right? My wife still likes to poke fun at me when my hair was bleach blonde for that week and a half before it started to fade out and turn kind of orange. But we dyed our hair. I had a Rick Faulkner who came in as a pitching coach for a number of years. He shared with me, today it would be a podcast. Back then it was a cassette tape of a talk by Skip Burp of LSU, and talking about some of the team building activities that he did to try to help his athletes come together. And we were sharing that tape. I had my Walkman back in those days, and I was letting other players listen to the tape. And in the tape he's talking about a rope, grab hold of the rope. And I went and I got a piece of rope and I cut it into small pieces and kind of burned the ends so it didn't fray. And before we took the field for that first game, everybody had a piece of the rope. And in the last inning, Grant Giffen's reaching into his back pocket and he's holding up his piece of the rope. And it was a pretty powerful moment. We came together, we got it done. And it's amazing how that rope story continues to resurface. Mike Caruso used it at our wedding. He was the master of ceremonies at our wedding, and he used it there. And others have used it at other points in time as well. And it's such a powerful metaphor. But again, there's just little things that I was in a different headspace at that point. I knew I wasn't going to be starting at first base in that tournament. I did see a little bit of game time, but I was going to do everything I could to make sure that my teammates were ready to go on the field and perform at their best. And what an experience it was. All those 4 years of hard work, and both on and off the field, to kind of get us to that point. At that stage, we'd achieved kind of full varsity status. We were competing in the OU way. Like, there was so many things that we overcame in those 4 years. And to go out on that note was just outstanding.
It's amazing, Jess. I had the benefit of winning a couple Canadian championships after my Brock career was over. And I will say this about 95. I think our actual championship ring was making it through the year. And because I think that the victory is actually in how people's lives have unfolded afterwards, because it was so foreign for everybody. And people react differently when you apply, unique circumstances to their lives. They respond in some ways. For some people, they had to go clear their head, and then they've gone on to, raise amazing families or do wonderful things in their career. But time and time again, as I kind of talk to the players now, after 30 years, they've, I think that was that team's championship legacy. It wasn't a ring that was earned on the field. It was a ring that was earned by surviving it and by laying a foundation that allowed for subsequent championship teams to spring off of. If you step off and start on the wrong footing, there's lots of examples of programs that are no longer around. Georgian College, George Brown College. I don't believe that Waterloo is currently fielding a team. York. Lots of teams that launched baseball programs that went 2 or 3 years or 4 years or 5 years and then fizzled out and died out because the popularity of the sport, all told in the province, has waned over that time. That was the zenith. That was all the 92, 93 Jays had won World Series championships, and enrollment was never higher than it was at that point. So, there's more people in the province now, but baseball enrollment still struggles a little bit as a sport. So we capitalized a little bit on a wave there, but it's really interesting to hear about, something that you picked up that had nothing to do with baseball, had everything to do with motivation and team building. And that's a great story. Let's transition a little bit to your life coming out of your baseball and Brock University experience. What kind of left turns did that take? And take us through it a little bit. And I mean, we're obviously continuing on a road of a lot of great self-awareness here. So why don't you take us on the Jess Dixon journey after winning a championship?
Okay. God, you said 30 years, and I kind of got chills, but it's true. It's been a while. So post championship, I stopped playing. I actually stopped playing summer ball. I was kind of getting burnt out with baseball, so I'd stopped playing summer ball. I decided to the summer of '98. I was working at a golf course. I had worked at a golf course through high school as well during the summer months, then worked at the sporting goods store in the winter months. I decided I was going to play more golf. I just needed to kind of clear my head of baseball, and really started, getting decent at it, I guess. I was also always okay, but kind of committed myself to it a little bit more. And then after the season was done, I stopped. I did not do any winter workouts or anything. I continued to help to manage the team, but it was kind of managing itself at that point. There wasn't a whole lot left to do. It had been was being funded by the athletic department, so I felt it was in a good place for me to kind of step away. Finished my degree. I took some courses during my last summer between third and fourth year that I took a reduced course load in first and second year, just trying to manage the transition to university and the time commitment to baseball. So I got caught up so I could graduate on time. And, while I was there, we started in physical education, but I ended up transferring into the sport management program. It was a program that emerged toward the end of my first year, and students who were in physical education could transfer directly into it if they met a certain grade threshold, which I did. And I didn't really know much about the field at that time, but I figured I'm kind of doing it and had been doing it in high school with the running of the baseball programs and, working at a sporting goods store and working at a golf course. I'm like, okay, it's, I feel like I had some background and transferred into the sport management program and I really kind of found my calling in terms of what I was interested in doing, and classes became easier, assignments and exams became easier. I just wanted to learn, as much as I could about, how the sport industry worked. And when I finished my undergraduate degree, realistically, I'd only taken a handful of courses that were sport management related, but I had a sport management degree, and I thought there's got to be more to learn about this. Like there's so many aspects of the industry that I haven't learned anything about. And there was one of the professors hosted kind of like a graduate program day where we had professors or representatives from a few different programs come and talk about their master's degrees. One of those programs was Niagara University and Canisius. Sorry, I guess it was Canisius. I can't go there because
Yeah.
they were beneath us at that point. But something about the conversation with the professor at the University of Windsor really intrigued me. And so I ended up applying to the University of Windsor and a few others. Came down to visit the University of Windsor, and was sold pretty much right away. They took a kind of an interest in who I was in a way that I didn't really get with the other programs that I applied to. Like there was something different about the way I was treated when I came down to visit, and ended up kind of taking a leap of faith and came here to do my master's degree. I was here for 2 years. At the end of the 2 years, I got invited to go back to teach at Brock for a couple of years. At that point, I was contemplating the possibility of going on and doing a PhD and pursuing a career in academia. And going back to Brock would allow me to, re-engage with the baseball program. I helped out a little bit, not on the field coaching, but I came to a lot of their practices through batting practice, and it was just sort of a presence to help out when I could. And I got to do some teaching in the sport management program that was really blossoming at that point in time. Lots of students, lots of program development, but not a lot of faculty. And so I was there for 2 years, got a wealth of teaching experience, and decided that was the career path for me. And so I ended up, after those 2 years, applying to do my PhD at the University of Massachusetts at Amherst. Moved there to Amherst, Massachusetts for 3 years. Worked on my PhD in the Eisenberg School of Management. And then at the end of my 3 years, the University of Windsor had a job posting. I applied to that and accepted. That was 18 years ago now. 2006 is when I started here at the University of Windsor, and been here ever since, and love what I do. I get to work with students and mentor them at the undergraduate and graduate levels, either through my teaching or involving them in my research, or helping them secure internship placements and embark upon their careers in the sport industry. I've been our graduate coordinator for a few years. I've been head of the department now for in my second term as the head of the department, or will be starting, I guess, shortly. I did a year as acting dean. I've done all kinds of really great things at the University of Windsor that I probably wouldn't have had at other institutions. So I'm very thankful of the opportunities that have been presented to me here. Love being able to continue working with university-aged adults. They are all adults, and it feels like I've never really left the environment that I was in. Our faculty is such that our athletic department and our kinesiology department were the only two units within our faculty. So we have our coaches teaching classes. We have a lot of varsity athletes in our program. We have a baseball team here, that could do things very similar to Brock, but the circumstances are a little different in terms of funding and so forth. The nearest Ontario competitor is 2 hours away, so it's a slightly different competitive dynamic than what we had. But they do play an American schedule as well, and they play a lot of U.S. schools. So they've fed off of a lot of what Brock had been doing for a long time. But yeah, it's terrific. Achieved tenure, promotion, full professor. Love what I do. Still play golf. Went back to playing baseball for a while. I joined a 35 and over team, a 35 year and over team, and played with some of the guys that I played with at Brock in that last year, Matt Stazicki and Bill Gillen and Daryl Presley. We played in a 35 and over team in Woodsley, and played in a couple more national championships and won a couple provincials, and so that was kind of fun. But I've hung it up, and I just play golf now. I played a little bit of slow pitch, still play a little bit of hockey, but golf is my passion. I still try to play some competitive golf, so that's where my energies are spent these days.
Wow, that is, truthfully, I spent a year playing in Windsor with those same guys, and they were in Tecumseh at the time.
Yeah, the Thunder.
Tecumseh were an interesting team, and I was certainly a mercenary. I was coming off of a year in the intercounty, and they just need a left-handed starter. So it was fun. Matt Stazicki was just an incredible player to play with. It was quite. It reminded me a lot of Colin and Brad Reeson and Derek Minix, some of the best players I've had the chance to play with. I enjoyed it. The only thing I didn't enjoy was I had to drive in from London, and then we would have to drive.
Yeah, not so good.
No, and then we would have to drive, over the border. Here's a good question for you, because it's kind of an interesting thing. Are you a Tigers or a Jays fan now? And do you go over to see games over in Detroit?
I'm a hardcore Jays fan. Full
hey,
stop.
That's good.
I was at Game 5 of the '92 World Series when who the heck was it? Lonnie Smith or something had a grand slam for the Atlanta Braves and sent
Jack Morris. Yeah,
sent it back to Atlanta, and they won it in Game 6. And I was there when Joe Carter hit the home run in '93. So two of my favorite baseball memories. I got to share them with my younger brother. Blue Jays all the way.
I'm glad to see they've worn you down, because it's pretty much Tiger Town in Windsor, and it's hard coming in.
Unless you transplanted here. Like a lot of our faculty didn't grow up in Windsor, so they'd come here from other parts of the province, other parts of the country. They tend to be Blue Jay fans, but people who grew up in this area, yeah, they're Tigers fans through and through. But my wife and I were looking at the schedule just on Sunday. When are the Jays going to be in town? Let's get some tickets. Let's go watch the games, and because it is a beautiful stadium, it's a great place to watch baseball. And being in Windsor, you're a couple hours to Cleveland, a couple hours to Pittsburgh, a few more hours to Chicago. So you can go and see some, Cincinnati. You can go see a lot of baseball in a very short period of time from where we live.
Yeah, and I think outside of Caruso and a few others that have come from the area, I think Windsor is either misunderstood or really doesn't. People don't have a great concept of what it's like there. Why don't you tell us a little bit about why you love Windsor outside of the university? Because it's clear that you got a love for your professional situation, but personally, what's it been like living in Windsor?
Yeah, I think you hit the nail on the head. It's misunderstood and underappreciated, and that's okay, because that keeps our property values a little bit lower and makes the cost of living a little bit better, although people are starting to catch on. Windsor is the southernmost city in all of Canada. It was 20 degrees Celsius here today on today's February the 27th. It was warm all throughout the province of Ontario, but it is, as a golfer, I'm on the golf course in March, and I'm on it until usually the end of November. So an extended golf season. If you like being outdoors, I don't think there's any place better in Canada. You have access to every major professional sport, every major NCAA program with the University of Michigan and Michigan State and so forth. You have access to all the major entertainment venues in Detroit. You have there's just so much to do. A half-hour drive from where I'm sitting today, I could be at the Detroit airport, boarding a flight to pretty much anywhere in the world I want to go. And yeah, I couldn't do that where I grew up. I had to go to Toronto, and I'm just dreading what it's going to be like when the Gardner closes. Like getting
Don't
back.
don't talk to someone who lives literally 10 minutes north of the Gardner. So not even
Yeah.
5 minutes. Like it's right. I'm close to
I
Jamestown.
love going into Toronto, but you have to set aside an entire day to plan for it. I've already got my tickets for the Jays home opener this season, and trying to figure out, okay, we're gonna have to take the GO train in because there's no way we're driving in. But you kind of have to plan things out. Whereas here, if I want to go to a Red Wings game this weekend, I can pick up some tickets, go to the Joe Louis Arena, and be back in bed by 10:30, 10:45. I wouldn't. I'd be bumping along the Gardner or Lakeshore. If I was living in Burlington or Hamilton, not get home until after midnight.
It is somewhat frustrating, as is the cost of things. I took my daughter to Taylor Swift.
Good for you.
I'm going to say that's a few years ago now, but we went to Pittsburgh because for the cost of getting 35th row seats in Pittsburgh, the travel down, a hotel for a couple of nights, and all of our food and everything was the same as getting probably, nosebleed tickets in Toronto. So, there are a lot of cities that are accessible through that Windsor, the Windsor bridges and the Buffalo ones that, people should really discover. I know that Canadians tend to have a kind of a colored view of the United States, but I think one of the real benefits of us playing at Brock is we got to see the real United States. There are parts of New York State that were beautiful. I loved going to Cooperstown, but I think my favorite place was probably playing at St. Bonaventure, or I played in the summer in Syracuse. Beautiful spots, and people underestimate those kinds of things. And Ann Arbor, for example, is another
beautiful town,
great place. Or Frankenmuth, Michigan, which people don't know about, is it's kind of where they film, I think, most Hallmark movies because it's Christmas all year round.
All year round.
So that's exciting. Tell me I'm going to ask you just a couple. I haven't done this on other podcasts, but maybe it'd be kind of fun to do with you, I think, Jess, because I think you have such a professional demeanor that people don't always get. They're just impressed with your professionalism, the way you carry yourself. Do you have any embarrassing moments from your time at Brock other than kicking the helmet?
Oh yeah, Colin Tyler or Andrew Tinish or those guys, they'll have their share of them.
Yeah, Colin always points out my infamous balk where I threw it somehow into the dugout between first and home. I still have no idea.
If you made a mistake, Colin will know about
it. Maybe just a really off-kilter question to wrap it up here. Is there anything that you've got a fear or phobia of, like heights or snakes or sharks or any of that kind of stuff? Or are you just not one of those kinds of people that's wired that way?
I don't think so. I value life. So, there are some things I'm not going to go. I'm not somebody that's going to go jump out of an airplane and, hope that the parachute pulls. I'm a little bit risk averse when it comes to some of those extreme types of activities. But I don't think I'm afraid of anything. No, nothing rings a bell. Maybe the ridicule that I would get from Colin and Andrew for, kicking a helmet down the first base line on my way to pinch run, or, so there was one game, and I think it was in Nationals' third year, maybe. There was a play, I think runners on first and third, and I just brain cramp. Ground ball came to me, and instead of going to the plate, it was a tight game. And instead of going to the plate, I'm like, do I turn two? and so I sort of pivoted one way and then pivoted the other way. And I think the guy, by the time I figured out what I was going to do, the guy was already safe at first as well. So I don't think we got an out on that play. That's one that they like to give me a tough time on as well. So, but I'm glad I don't have to well, I say that knowing full well that something ridiculous could happen at this ball game in September, and they never let me live that down either. So that's entirely possible.
I think the reality. I think the reality is we're all going to do something that's probably, we're going to dread the invention of YouTube since we were playing.
Yeah, no doubt.
But and I would have been a YouTube superstar back in the day anyway, either for not being able to field to save my life or bad box or, any kind of outrageous behavior. I was generally in the middle of it. So, I'm going to try to find a way to stay dignified and at least hit the catcher in the mitt. And if I can do that once, then I'm going to pull out a microphone and retire on the mound in St. Catharines. But, it's also about, who's the most obscure, the person you had the least contact with that you're really looking forward to, I'm wondering what that person's doing in 30 years. I frequently admit that for me, it's Steve the Gypsy Vautour, trying to understand where his life has taken him, or Mark Kasoyan, because Kasoyan used to make me laugh uncontrollably.
Oh, yeah, he was hysterical.
But you got any of those kind of itches that you need to scratch when you meet our entire first year team back in person?
Yeah, I mean, guys like Kasoyan, Brian Simmons, haven't seen them in a long time. They were pretty funny. They were, alternated quite a bit at second base, so they were playing next to us and practicing next to us. So I kind of got to, have some fun with those guys over the years. Yeah, Vautour, kind of came and went. He was probably as close as we got to a rental player. I think once the season was over, he probably withdrew from all his classes, and I don't know if anybody ever saw him again after that. But what a contribution he made to that first year team. I mean, he was our closer. He was our MVP. There was nothing that guy couldn't do. He was exceptional. Jeff Hoover, he left after first year, went down to Niagara there, and kind of lost touch with him. Occasionally he'd show his head at a bar or something like that, but kind of lost touch with him. I understand he's working back at Brock in a similar kind of capacity, or at least was. I'm not 100% sure.
Hoover was.
Yes, those are some of the guys. I mean, I think I've reconnected with Nate Capusa on Facebook. He some random thing, he was sharing an office next door to Fabio Del Rio for a period of time. I don't think that's the case anymore, but somehow Fab's like, hey, do you know this guy? I'm like, yeah, I played with him. Ryan Thompson, every once in a while he'll reach out for something, so I kind of have some idea what he's up to. Some of the pitchers that I didn't really get to know particularly well, so it'd be great to see them. Rob Green, tons of respect for. Haven't really seen him in a number of years. Some of the other guys like Ron Strow and Todd Nye, and there's lots of people there that I never really got to know all that well, that I'm looking forward to reconnecting with.
It's a different narrative if you were on the pitching staff and you saw what Todd went through. And
for sure.
I don't have the words for it. I typically am not short of words, but, Todd was a friend right from the beginning before there was a Coach McRae. His attitude shone through right from the beginning, and for life to take such a weird left turn for him and to see that he's an educator, a principal, and a leader now, I think, there's really two, there were two factions in that first team. There were the Oshawa guys. We're all still tight. We still talk a lot and have seen each other since Brock, for sure. And the Burlington guys were a big faction. But now I think, as I get to talk to people 30 years later, there's two big factions, and they're completely different types of definitions in life. There are, educators and coaches. There's an inordinate amount of people who are in forms of mentoring others through either being educators or principals or teachers. Colin's a teacher. Ebel teaches police officers.
Yep.
And then there's folks that are running their own business, and and there's Teddy, myself, Rob Green, who I talk to all the time, and Nate Capusa, Joel Garden, all kind of in that mix.
Yeah, Joel's another one, because he was there the 1 year and then left and didn't really,
he was a really quiet guy, truthfully, and I think very young too, right? Like, Jess, I'll say this with a lot of respect, but you're like a 35-year-old, 19-year-old. You're just mature and good and all that kind of stuff.
Next year, high school, I did
it. We needed those. Like, I respect those folks on a team more than anyone could possibly imagine, because I was not one of them. I'm a fire plug. So, when I look at Ted and I look at yourself and I look at Colin has this quality, Rob Green certainly has it. They're people that ground everybody else, because, you had people who were like myself or Larry Houston. I'm trying to, I think Larry and I would be the two most obvious candidates for people who are like we're fiery, right? At the end of the day.
There were lots that followed after you, though.
What's that?
There were lots that followed after you.
Yeah, and those are different personalities in that mix. So you need to balance those out. If you have a team full of that, it's like trying to herd cats. So when you ground that with people who are thoughtful, considerate, good teammates, and you blend that with these firefly type of performer types, you get the right mix, and you eventually you have successful programs when you blend those two things. So, for me, it's really interesting to see that your personality hasn't really changed much over 30 years. I've probably mellowed a little bit, but not much. And, and when I talked to Ted, I've known Ted Genren since we were in grade 2 together. That's how long.
Wow.
And, he's had quite a life journey, and but every time we talk, it's like the first time we talked on the grade 2 grass, playing bumper cars.
Cool.
So, this is a fabric that weaves through all these people's lives. And I think it'll be really special and comforting for the people, the other 25, 26, 30 people involved, because of the coaches. When they see you, they're going to know exactly why you're a Hall of Famer. You bring that sense of calm and positivity to things, and are the ultimate team guy. Windsor is getting it now, and Brock got it for a lot of years. So we're excited about it, Jess. And, I don't know anyone who's any good at golf. I'm certainly not. I can throw a ball further than I can hit it. So, we might have to find someone that might be able to match up with you in a foursome, but I'm sure that Colin will have tons of stupid things to say, and hopefully we can find a way to get him back for one of those zingers, or maybe Coach Kemp will get him, and we'll see you on the field in 8 months' time, my friend. And maybe we'll stop in the middle of that game and quickly put on a pair of headphones and listen to a little Pulls Apart or Keep Talking, or one of these kind of great Floyd tunes from the Division Bell. But I also say this, knowing the situation that you inherited at the end of '95, the program wouldn't have gone on if you hadn't have stepped up. And every Brock graduate since then, owes you a huge debt of gratitude, because it wasn't easy. People don't leave their startup operations after a year. We didn't really have much of a choice, truthfully. The choice was, we could have run another year of Brock, but then we wouldn't have had a league to play in. So when you have these kinds of things, it's kind of like here's two bad choices. So, I think as we look back for 30 years, everyone made the right choice coming out of it, and the results couldn't be better. So, giving you a big high five there, my friend, and we'll see you in 8 months.
Thank you. I certainly appreciate the kind words, and I appreciated then, as I do now, that you and Ted entrusted me to take care of your baby and help it grow and develop into the wonderful program that it's become. So thanks for planting those seeds.
You could have used any other analogy. That means Ted had to be the mom, which is just brutal as I think about it. Thanks, Jess. Take it easy, eh?
It's a pleasure, Mike. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye now.
Well, the smell